In this video, we're going to be talking about the algebra of functions. The first thing is talking about the different types of operations that we'll be performing. We'll be doing sums, differences, products, and quotients. We'll be evaluating them and looking at the general forms as well. So if you were given two functions, you can add those functions, subtract them, multiply them, divide them. And there's two ways that you might see it written. You might see it broken up as just saying function f plus function g, or it might read as f plus g of x. But that means the same thing. It's just function f plus function g. Similarly with the rest of these, right? So f minus g of x equals f of x minus g of x. F times g of x is the same thing as f of x times g of x, and f divided by g of x is the same thing as function f divided by function g, where function g can't be 0, right? When we're dividing, you cannot divide by 0. Let's go ahead and look at a few examples. This first example, it says if f of x equals x plus 3 and g of x equals 3x minus 1, find all of these. So part A, we are finding f of negative 4 plus f of 3. So we're only dealing with function f, and we're evaluating it at negative 4 and 3, and then adding those answers together. Let's go ahead and make this a little bit bigger so we can see. Well, I was hoping I could scroll over, but I guess I can't. So maybe we won't. Alright, f of negative 4. I'm just going to evaluate it like I would if I only had f of negative 4. Everywhere that I see an x, I'm going to replace it with negative 4. And then simplify. Negative 4 plus 3 is a negative 1. Same thing with f of 3. Still using function f, replacing x with 3. And 3 plus 3 is 6. Now that I have f of negative 4 and f of 3, based on this operation, I'm going to add those. 6 plus a negative 1 will give me 5. So overall, that equaled 5. This next one is the same thing, only we're subtracting. Well, we've already evaluated f of negative 4, and we got negative 1, minus, we have evaluated f of negative 3 over here, and we got 6. So negative 1 minus 6 is negative 7. I don't have to reevaluate them if I've already done it previously. Now these next two examples are the same types of problems of adding and subtracting, only they're written in different form. This says f plus g of negative 2. But remember, that's the same thing as just evaluating f of negative 2 and adding it to g of negative 2. So we're going to evaluate both of those functions at negative 2 and then add the answers. So for f of negative 2, again replacing x with negative 2, plus 3. Negative 2 plus 3 is a positive 1. And now we're going to use g, a different function, g of negative 2. Make sure you're paying attention. So over in g, that one says 3 times x minus 1. So 3, replacing x with negative 2 minus 1. That's the same thing as 3 times negative 2 is a negative 6 minus 1. Gives me a negative 7. And since I'm running out of room, I'm going to write it up here. It will equal, the answer we got for f of negative 2 was 1, plus the answer we got for g of negative 2 was a negative 7, and that will equal negative 6. Alright, and then the last one in this row, G minus F. Now, it's really important to pay attention to the order that these are in, right? If I found these answers and I did 1 minus a -7 versus -7 minus 1, those are different things. Subtraction is not commutative. I cannot add it in any order I want. I have to add it in the order that it's stated, or subtract it in the order that's stated. So, first I need to find G of 5. I'm going to go ahead and use a different color so that these don't get all mixed up. So G of 5, that's going to be 3 times 5 is 15. 15 minus 1 is 14. So G of 5 will be positive 14. And then F of 5, right, because this is the same thing as G of 5 minus F of 5. F of 5, replacing x with 5. So 5 plus 3 is going to give me 8. And then overall, I need to subtract them. G minus the F. So G was 14. F is 8. So 14 minus 8 ends up 6. That's the final answer. So you have to evaluate these functions at the x value given, and then make sure you do the operation. You're not done until you get that final answer. Why don't you guys try the next 4? Alright, let's go ahead and look at these. So on part E, we have G of 2 plus G of -1. So we're only using function G here. G of 2, we're taking 3, replacing x with 2, then subtracting 1. So 3 times 2 is 6. 6 minus 1 is 5. So G of 2 is 5. G of -1 will be 3 times a -1, which is -3. Subtract 1 more, we get -4. Now we need to do the addition. So G of 2 plus G of -1 is the same thing as what we found for each of those. So 5 plus -4 will give me +1 for the final answer. So there's part E. Should end up being +1. Now part F. So I'm going to run out of room here, so I'm going to only write the basic notation that we need. So G of 2 minus G of -1. Well, we found G of 2 over here already, and that was 5. So G of 2 was 5. Oops, I think I want to use a different color. So G of 2 was 5 minus G of -1 was -4. So just be careful, make sure that you are using this negative here, and it's a -4. So we are subtracting a -4. When we subtract a negative, that becomes plus, and we end up with 9 overall. Part G is G plus F of -1. So we are really finding g of negative 1 plus f of negative 1. Notice that the g comes first, but it's addition. And addition you can do in any order you want. So this one's not going to mess us up if we didn't do it in the right order, but it's always important to pay attention to the order that you're given. So looking at g of negative 1 first, we're plugging it in. 3 times a negative 1 minus 1. We'll get a negative 3 minus 1, which is negative 4. And then f now. F of negative 1. So we're taking negative 1 plus 3, and that will end up being 2. And then we need to add those together. So g of negative 1 was negative 4 plus f of negative 1, which was 2, will give us overall negative 2. And lastly here, we're doing f minus g of 4. Same thing as f of 4 minus g of 4. Kind of look like 9s, but they're supposed to be 4s. So we need to find f of 4 first. And I'm going to use a different color so it shows up between the two problems. F of 4. This is going to be 4 plus 3. And we get 7. Then we need g of 4, which is 3 replacing x with 4 minus 1. That'll be 12 minus 1, or 11. And then we need to subtract f minus g. The order matters here. So overall, this f minus g of 4 will be 7 minus 11. We'll end up with negative 4. How'd you do?